Have you ever sat there while your husband ended your marriage between the appetizer and the main course, with his mother cheering him on? They called me a gold digger and tossed me out like garbage. They had no idea I was the silent owner of a conglomerate worth tens of billions of dollars. They thought they were burying me, but they were actually digging their own graves. My name is Cora Freeman, and as I walked up the limestone steps of the Crowley estate, I told myself that tonight would be different. I adjusted the hem of my dress, a simple navy sheath that I had bought off the rack at a department store, knowing full well it would be the cheapest thing in the room. The air was crisp, typical for late October in Connecticut, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. It was the sinking dread in the pit of my stomach, the intuition of a wife who knows her marriage is on a ventilator, yet still shows up to hold the hand of the man pulling the plug. The butler opened the heavy oak doors before I could knock. He did not smile. He simply took my coat and gestured toward the dining room with a stiffness that suggested he was afraid to catch whatever social disease I was carrying. Inside, the dining room was a cavern of mahogany and crystal. The chandelier overhead cost more than the house I grew up in. My mother-in-law, Vivian Crowley, sat at the head of the table like a queen on a throne of velvet and spite. Her silver hair was coiffed into a helmet of perfection, and her eyes, sharp and predatory, locked onto me the moment I crossed the threshold. Grant was there, sitting to her right, my husband, the man who had promised to love and cherish me 2 years ago. He was swirling a glass of scotch, staring intently at the amber liquid as if it held the secrets to the universe. He did not look up. He did not stand. He did not even flinch. I walked toward the empty chair next to him, but Vivian's voice sliced through the silence. "Not there, Cora," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I have had the staff set a place for you at the other end. The lighting is much better for you down there." It was a power move, plain and simple. She was placing me at the foot of the table, as far away from the family nucleus as physically possible. I was being exiled to the children's table, except there were no children, just the vast, polished expanse of wood separating me from my husband. I took my seat without a word. I had learned early on that fighting Vivian on small things only gave her ammunition for the big things. Dinner began with a terrifying efficiency. The servants moved like ghosts, placing plates of seared scallops and truffle foam in front of us. The only sound was the scraping of silver against china. "So, Cora," Vivian began, wiping the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "How is your little job going? Grant tells me you are still insisting on working as an administrative assistant. It must be so quaint, filing papers for a living." I kept my eyes on my plate. "I enjoy it, Vivian. It keeps me busy." "Busy," she scoffed. "Yes, I suppose someone with your background needs to feel useful. It is a shame you never took to the charitable committees I suggested. But then again, one needs a certain pedigree to navigate those waters. Your mother was a waitress, was she not?" My grip tightened on my fork. "She was a restaurant manager." "Of a diner," Vivian corrected, smiling as if she had just won a prize. "There is no shame in it, dear. We all have our stations in life. Some of us are born to lead, and some are born to serve. It is just unfortunate when lines get crossed." She took a sip of wine. "Speaking of lines, Malcolm was telling me the club fees have gone up by 15% this year. I told him it hardly matters, but I suppose for someone used to counting coupons, that sounds like a fortune." I looked at Grant, begging him silently to intervene. He was my husband. He was supposed to be my partner, but he just kept drinking. His eyes glazed over. He looked like a man who had already checked out, a husk in a bespoke suit. "Grant," I said softly, my voice carrying across the long table. "Are you okay? You haven't not touched your food." He stopped swirling his glass. He set it down on the table with a heavy thud that made the crystal stemware tremble. Then, for the first time that night, he looked at me. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I used to see when he looked at me. There was no love there. There was not even hate. Just a profound, terrifying indifference. "I am not hungry," Grant said. His voice was steady, rehearsed. And I cannot do this anymore. Do what? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. This, he gestured vaguely between us. Us? The charade? I want a divorce. Cora. The room went dead silent. The air left my lungs. It was not a discussion. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same emotional weight as ordering a coffee. Grant, I whispered, we can talk about this. Not here. Not in front of— There is nothing to talk about, Vivian interrupted, looking delighted. He has finally come to his senses. Honestly, Cora, we all knew it was only a matter of time. You were a fun little experiment for him, a walk on the wild side. But you never fit. You were like a plastic fork in a silver set. Before I could respond, the double doors to the dining room opened. I turned, expecting a servant. Instead, a woman walked in. She was tall, blonde, and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from old money and zero consequences. Delaney Price. I knew her name because Vivian had mentioned her a dozen times in the last 6 months. The daughter of a senator. The woman Vivian had always wanted Grant to marry. Delaney was wearing a red dress that cost more than my car. She walked into the room as if she owned the deed to the property. She did not look at me. She walked straight to Grant and placed a manicured hand on his shoulder. Grant leaned into her touch. The nausea hit me in a wave. It was not just a divorce, it was a replacement. I think it is best if you leave now, Delaney said, her voice smooth and smoky. She looked at me then, a smirk playing on her red lips. We have family matters to discuss, family matters. I stood up, my legs shaking. Grant, is this what you want? You are letting them do this? Grant looked down at his hands. Delaney understands me. Cora, she understands this world. You never did. You were always trying too hard. It was exhausting watching you pretend to be one of us. Pretend? I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, hysterical and sharp. I never pretended to be anything but your wife. And that was the problem, Vivian snapped. You were a leech. Cora, a gold digger. We saw it from a mile away. You thought you could marry into the Crowley name and secure your future. Well, the ride is over. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad. You get nothing, no alimony, no assets. Just whatever you came in with, which, if I recall, was essentially nothing. You are a mistake, Grant said, finally looking me in the eye. The biggest mistake of my life. The words hit me like physical blows. Gold digger, mistake, leech. I looked around the table. Vivian, smug and triumphant. Malcolm, her husband, ignoring the scene entirely as he ate his scallops. Delaney, possessive and arrogant, marking her territory. And Grant, the man I had nursed through the flu. The man I had supported when his father belittled him. The man I had loved. He was looking at me with pure disgust. They thought I was devastated. They thought I was broken, and in a way, I was. The part of me that believed in love, the part of me that believed Grant was a good man, died right there on that Persian rug. But something else was waking up. I looked at the room one last time. I memorized the wainscoting. I memorized the painting of the hunt on the wall. I memorized the smug curve of Delaney's lips and the cruelty in Vivian's eyes. Fine, I said. My voice did not shake. If that is what you want. It is, Grant said. My lawyers will send the papers to your apartment tomorrow. I assume you will be moving back into that shoebox you lived in before. Don't worry about where I will live, I said. Oh, we won't, Vivian laughed. Show her out, Delaney. Make sure she does not steal the silverware on her way to the door. Delaney stepped aside, sweeping her arm toward the exit in a mock gesture of hospitality. Goodbye, Cora. Try not to trip on your way out. I turned my back on them. I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor with a steady, rhythmic beat. I did not run. I did not cry. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing my tears. The butler was waiting in the foyer, holding my coat. He looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. I took the coat from him and put it on. Good evening, madam, he said quietly. Good evening, Arthur, I replied. I stepped out into the night. The heavy door clicked shut behind me, sealing the warmth and the light inside, leaving me in the cold darkness. I walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my feet. The wind bit through my thin coat, but I hardly felt it. I reached the iron gates at the end of the property and stopped. I turned back to look at the house. It stood on the hill, lit up like a beacon, imposing and grand. It looked impenetrable, a fortress of wealth and power. They thought they had just thrown out the trash. They thought they had humiliated a nobody, a poor girl who had reached too high and fallen back to earth. They were celebrating in there right now, probably toasting with a vintage champagne that cost $2,000 a bottle. They had no idea. They did not know that the administrative assistant job was a cover. They did not know that the shoebox apartment was one of 50 properties I owned in the city. They did not know that while they were inheriting wealth, I was building it. They called me a gold digger. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. I had one notification, an email from my chief financial officer. Subject: North Star Quantum Q3 report. Body: revenue up 12%. The acquisition is complete. We are ready to move on the next phase whenever you give the word. I stared at the screen. North Star Quantum, my company, my empire, a quiet giant in the tech world that I had built from the ground up under a pseudonym, protecting it from the vultures like the Crowleys. I typed a short reply. Prepare the legal team. I want a full asset review of the Crowley family holdings by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I hit send. Grant had wanted a divorce. He had wanted to cut ties. He had wanted to treat me like a business transaction that had gone bad. Fine. If they wanted to make this about money, if they wanted to make this about power, then I would speak their language. I looked up at the house one last time. The lights in the dining room were still bright. You want a divorce, Grant? I whispered to the cold wind. I will give you a divorce, but first, I am going to buy the roof over your head. I turned away from the gate and walked toward the waiting town car that had been parked around the corner, invisible to the house. The driver opened the door for me. Where to, Ms. Freeman? He asked. To the office, I said, sliding into the leather seat. We have work to do. The car pulled away, leaving the Crowley estate behind. The humiliation was still burning on my skin, but beneath it, the ice was forming. They had broken my heart, but they had just unleashed my ambition. And unlike my heart, my ambition had a budget of billions. The silence inside the town car was heavy, a stark contrast to the noise of the last 2 hours. As the city lights streaked past the tinted windows, my mind did not go to the future. Not yet. It drifted back to the beginning, to the moment the trap was set. Long before I knew it was a cage, I needed to understand how I had let this happen, how a woman who managed billion-dollar hedge funds and negotiated hostile takeovers before breakfast could have been so blind in her own living room. It started 3 years ago at the Met Gala. Not the red carpet part where the celebrities preened, but the quiet donor dinner beforehand. I was there strictly to observe. I had just anonymously donated $5 million to the museum's restoration fund, and I wanted to see where the money was going without being hounded for more. I wore a black dress that I had bought off the rack for $200, wore no jewelry, and kept my hair in a simple bun. In a room full of peacocks, I was a sparrow. That was exactly what drew Grant Crowley to me. I was standing near a pillar, sipping sparkling water and checking my watch, when he approached. He looked different then, less jagged. His smile reached his eyes, or at least, I thought it did. You look like you are plotting an escape route, he had said, leaning against the pillar beside me. I looked at him, amused. Is it that obvious? Painfully, he laughed. Everyone else here is trying to get noticed. You are trying to disappear. It is refreshing. I am Grant. Cora, I replied. He didn't ask Cora who, or what does your father do, right away. He just talked to me. He told me he was tired of the pretense of his social circle. He told me he wanted something real, something grounded. He looked at my simple dress and my lack of diamonds, and he didn't see poverty. He saw purity. He saw a blank slate. I fell for it. I fell for the idea that he loved me for my lack of pretension. I was so used to men wanting me for my portfolio or my connections that Grant's interest in just Cora felt like a miracle. I decided to keep my true identity hidden a little longer, just to be safe, just to enjoy this feeling of being loved for myself. We married 6 months later. It was a whirlwind, a blur of romantic dinners and promises that felt like iron but turned out to be smoke. I thought we were a team against the world. I did not see that to Grant. I was not a partner. I was a project. The first crack in the facade appeared the day I met Vivian. Grant took me to the estate for brunch. I remember the way she looked at my shoes. It was a look of absolute biological rejection. "She is quaint, Grant," Vivian had said, as if I were not standing right there. "But are you sure she can keep up? The Crowleys are not exactly known for living simply." Grant had laughed then, squeezing my hand. "That is exactly why I love her, Mother. She grounds me. She is not obsessed with status like everyone else." At the time, I thought he was defending me. Looking back, I realize he was not defending me. He was using me to rebel against his mother. I was a prop in their lifelong power struggle. After the wedding, the rebellion faded, and the conditioning began. It was subtle at first, a suggestion here, a sigh there. "Maybe do not wear that dress to the company party. Cora," Grant said one evening, about 2 months into our marriage. He was adjusting his tie in the mirror, not looking at me. "Mother says you looked a bit like the help last time. We do not want people to think I cannot provide for you." "I thought you liked that I was simple," I said, hurt stinging my chest. "I do," he replied, finally turning to me with a look of pity that was worse than anger. "But there is a difference between simple and plain. You represent the family now. You need to step up." I tried. God, how I tried. I read etiquette books. I learned the difference between a salad fork and a fish fork. I listened to his long, winding rants about his insecurities at the company, about how his father Malcolm never trusted him with the big deals. I became his cheerleader, his therapist, his soft place to land. But nothing was ever enough. If I stayed quiet, I was dull. If I spoke up, I was embarrassing. Grant began to spend more time at the main estate with Vivian. When he came home, he smelled of his mother's expensive perfume and her toxic opinions. He started repeating her phrases. He started looking at me not with love, but with critical assessment. I started to shrink. Cora Freeman, who had built North Star Quantum from a garage startup into a global titan, began to feel small. I questioned my own worth. I looked in the mirror and saw what they saw. A nobody. I began to believe that I was lucky Grant had deigned to marry me. One rainy Tuesday in November, about a year into the marriage, I came home to find Grant sitting in the living room with a brochure for an etiquette school in Switzerland. "Mother thinks this would be good for you," he said, sliding the glossy paper across the coffee table. "Just a 6-week course, to polish the rough edges." I stared at the brochure. "My edges are fine, Grant. I have a job. I have a life here." "Your job?" he scoffed. "Filing papers? Answering phones? It is hardly a career. Cora, it is a hobby. This course would actually give you some value in the real world, in my world." That word, value. It struck me then, a dull ache in my chest. He did not want an equal. He liked that I was an administrative assistant. He liked that I supposedly had no money. It made him feel powerful. It made him feel like the savior. But simultaneously, he despised me for it because I didn't bring him the social clout his mother demanded. I was trapped in a paradox. If I succeeded, I threatened his masculinity. If I remained simple, I was an embarrassment to his legacy. "I am not going to Switzerland, Grant," I said quietly. He stood up, his face flushing with irritation. "You are so stubborn. You never listen. You think you know everything, but you know nothing about how this world works. You are just average, Cora. and I am trying to help you be more." He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain against the window. I should have left then. I should have packed my bags, driven to my penthouse in the city, and revealed who I really was. I should have crushed him with my bank account balance right then and there. But I didn't, because I was in love with the memory of the man who had leaned against the pillar at the gala. I was in love with the illusion. I convinced myself that he was just stressed, that Vivian was manipulating him, that if I just loved him enough, he would come back to me. I doubled down. I played the role of the dutiful, supportive wife even harder. I swallowed the insults. I ignored the way he flinched when I touched him in public. I ignored the late nights he spent at the office, even though I knew the Crowley workload was light. I didn't know about Delaney then, not specifically, but I felt the space she occupied. I felt the ghost of another woman in our marriage, someone who fit the mold I was breaking just by existing. I spent nights awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with me. Was I not pretty enough? Was I not smart enough? Who could calculate risk assessment models in my head, could not solve the equation of my own marriage. The irony was bitter. I had hidden my wealth to avoid being used for my money. Instead, I was used for my perceived lack of it. I was the canvas upon which Grant projected his own insecurities. He needed someone to be less than him so he could feel like enough. And I, in my desire to be loved for myself, had given him exactly what he wanted. I had made myself small. I had folded my wings and sat in the cage, waiting for him to appreciate the song. But Grant didn't want a songbird. He wanted a parrot that would repeat whatever his mother said. As the car turned a corner, the memory faded, leaving a cold resolve in its wake. The girl who had stood by that pillar in the black dress was gone. The woman who had tried to learn etiquette to please a man with no spine was gone. They had spent 2 years telling me I was nothing. They had spent tonight stripping me of my name and my home. I looked out at the skyline, spotting the towering spire of the Quantum building in the distance. My building. They were right about one thing. The marriage had been an illusion, but they were wrong about who the magician was. They thought they had seen behind the curtain, but they had never even found the stage. Grant had fallen in love with a mask, and tonight he had smashed it. He was about to find out what lay underneath, and it was not a frightened little girl from a diner. It was a storm. As I sat in the plush leather chair of my executive suite, watching the city sleep 20 floors below, I began to dissect the timeline of my marriage's demise like a forensic accountant auditing a fraudulent ledger, now that the emotional fog was lifting, replaced by the cold clarity of betrayal. I could see the patterns I had missed. I had been looking at my marriage through the lens of a wife trying to save a relationship, but I should have been looking at it as a CEO analyzing a hostile takeover, because that is exactly what it was. Delaney Price did not just happen. She was not a random variable in the equation of my life. She was a calculated insertion. It began about 8 months ago. I remembered the first coincidence with a clarity that made my teeth ache. It was a Sunday brunch at the club, a ritual Vivian insisted upon. We were seated on the patio, Grant picking at his eggs Benedict, complaining about a merger that had stalled. I was offering solutions, actual, viable business strategies, but he was waving them off, his ego too fragile to accept advice from his wife. Then, a shadow fell over our table. "Vivian, is that you?" We looked up to see Delaney Price standing there, glowing in a white tennis dress that looked like it had never seen a drop of sweat. She held a racket loosely in one hand, more prop than equipment. "Delaney!" Vivian's face lit up with a warmth she had never, not once, directed at me. "My goodness, look at you. It has been ages since the senator brought you by." "I just finished a set with the girls," Delaney said, her eyes sliding over me like I was a smudge on the tablecloth before locking onto Grant. "Grant Crowley? I have not seen you since. Was it the summer gala in the Hamptons?" 3 years ago, Grant said, sitting up straighter. He sucked in his stomach instinctively. "You have grown up. And you have become even more handsome," she teased, a practiced lilt in her voice. Vivian immediately insisted she join us for iced tea. That 20-minute tea turned into an hour. Vivian spent the entire time reminiscing about people I did not know, places I had not been, and social circles I was excluded from. They built a wall of shared history brick by brick, trapping Grant inside with them and leaving me on the outside. I told myself it was just bad manners. I was wrong. It was a siege. Over the next few weeks, Delaney appeared everywhere. We went to the opera. She was in the box next to us, claiming a friend had canceled last minute. We went to a charity auction. She was on the committee, guiding Grant toward the high-ticket items, whispering in his ear about which investments would make him look powerful. "She is just friendly, Cora," Grant had said when I brought it up one night in our bedroom. He was checking his reflection in the mirror, turning his head side to side. "She is impressed by me. Is that a crime? God, you are so insecure sometimes." He accused me of insecurity, but he was the one drinking her flattery like water in a desert. Grant was a man who felt small. His father dominated him at the office. His mother dominated him at home. He was desperate to be the big man, the hero. I made the mistake of being his partner. I offered him reality. I supported him, which meant sometimes telling him the truth he did not want to hear. Delaney offered him a fantasy. She played the damsel who needed his wisdom, or the admirer who was awestruck by his mediocre achievements. She fed the narcissism that Vivian had cultivated in him since birth. I started to notice the isolation tactics about 4 months ago. Invitations to family events would arrive with the wrong time listed for me, or Grant would forget to tell me about a dinner until an hour before, leaving me scrambling and looking frantic while Delaney sat there, poised and perfect, having helped Vivian plan the menu. "It is a shame Cora is always so disorganized," I heard Vivian say to a group of women in the powder room at the club. I was in a stall, freezing, my hand over my mouth. But what can you expect? She does not understand the rhythm of our lives. Delaney, on the other hand, she is such a natural. The rumors started then, subtle at first, then vicious. People I had thought were acquaintances began to turn their backs when I approached. I caught snippets of conversation. Married him for the money. Trapped him. Formerly a waitress at a truck stop. They were rewriting my history. They were painting me as the villain in my own life story, so that when they finally cut me out, it would look like justice. But the final blow, the piece of the puzzle that turned this from an affair into a conspiracy, was the pregnancy. It happened 2 weeks before the divorce dinner. Grant had come home late, smelling of scotch and expensive perfume. Delaney's perfume. He looked pale, shaking. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "She is pregnant," he whispered. The world stopped. I stood there, holding a book I had been reading, feeling the blood drain from my face. "Delaney?" I asked, though I knew the answer. He nodded. It was an accident. Cora, one night, I was drunk. I felt lonely. You were working late, and she was just there, and she understood the pressure I was under with Mother." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the strings. An accident? Delaney Price was a woman who planned her outfits 3 weeks in advance. Vivian Crowley was a woman who did not let a gardener plant a begonia without her express written permission. There were no accidents in that family. "Does your mother know?" I asked. Grant looked up, his eyes swimming with guilt and something else. Relief. She was the one who told me. Delaney went to her first. She was afraid to tell me. Of course she did. The script became blindingly clear. Delaney goes to Vivian. Vivian consoles her, probably popping a bottle of champagne the second Delaney leaves the room. They present it to Grant not as a problem, but as a solution. Here is the heir you need, Grant. Here is the woman who fits the mold. Here is your exit strategy from the mistake you made with Cora. The pregnancy was the kill shot. It was the weaponized biological event designed to override any lingering loyalty Grant might have had toward me. It gave him the moral permission to leave. He was not abandoning his wife. He was doing the right thing for his unborn child. "I have to do right by her. Cora, Grant had said, his voice gaining strength as he recited the lines his mother had likely fed him. The Crowleys take care of their own. And what am I? I had asked, my voice barely a whisper. Am I not your own? He had looked away. You are strong, Cora. You can take care of yourself. Delaney needs me. He was right. I could take care of myself. But he was wrong about why. Sitting in my office now, I realized the cruelty of it was breathtaking. They had not just cheated on me, they had sourced, vetted, and installed my replacement while I was still sleeping in the marital bed. Vivian had likely picked Delaney out of a catalog of eligible socialites the moment she realized I wasn't going to bend to her will. They had manufactured a scandal to cover a corporate restructuring of their family unit. I opened the folder on my desk labeled Crowley Family Trust, Preliminary Audit. My finger traced the line connecting Vivian's personal accounts to a consulting firm owned by Delaney's father. There were transfers, significant ones. Consulting fees that coincided perfectly with the dates of those accidental meetings. A cold smile touched my lips. Grant thought he had slipped up. He thought he had made a mistake in a moment of weakness. He did not know he had been studying a mare at his mother's request. They thought they had won. They had the heir. They had the social standing. They had successfully purged the waitress from their bloodline. But they had made one fatal calculation error. They assumed that because I was quiet, I was blind. They assumed that because I did not fight for my seat at the table, I did not own the building the table stood in. I closed the file. The detective work was done. I knew the motive. I knew the method. I knew the perpetrators. Now it was time for the sentencing. Grant, I whispered to the empty room, you left me because you thought I was a liability. You have no idea that I was the only asset keeping your family afloat. I reached for the phone to call my legal team. The accident of Delaney's pregnancy was about to collide with the very intentional reality of my wrath. They wanted a drama? I would give them a tragedy. The glass walls of my office at North Star Quantum were not just architectural choices. They were a metaphor for my life. Transparency on one side, reflection on the other. To the world below, I was invisible, a ghost in the machine of the global economy. But up here, surrounded by servers that hummed with the data of half the Western Hemisphere, I was the architect. They called me a nobody. They called me a waitress's daughter who got lucky. They had no idea that the phone in Grant's pocket, the navigation system in Vivian's luxury sedan, and the security grid protecting their estate all ran on software that I had written. I am the founder and majority shareholder of North Star Quantum. My net worth fluctuates with the market, but as of the closing bell today, it sat comfortably around $42 billion. I do not say this to boast. In fact, for the last 7 years, I have spent millions of dollars ensuring that almost no one knows this fact. I scrubbed my name from search engines. I used layers of shell companies and proxy CEOs to sign the paperwork. I hired a former intelligence officer to erase my digital footprint. To the public, North Star Quantum is run by a board of directors. To the board, I am a voice on a secure line, a shadow they call the architect. Why go to such lengths? Why live in a small apartment and drive a 5-year-old sedan when I could own a private island? Because I learned the hard way that money is a solvent. It dissolves the glue that holds human relationships together. When I was 22, freshly out of college and sitting on my first patent, a compression algorithm that would eventually become the industry standard, I fell in love. His name is irrelevant now, but at the time, he was my world. I told him everything. I showed him the numbers. I shared my excitement about the first buyout offer, which was for $10 million. 2 weeks later, he tried to embezzle half the startup capital and flee to the Caymans. When I caught him, he did not even apologize. He just looked at me with cold, dead eyes and said that I owed him for putting up with me. That betrayal broke something fundamental in me. It taught me that as long as people saw the dollar signs, they would never see the woman. They would only see an ATM with a pulse. So, I created Cora, the administrative assistant. It was the perfect camouflage. It was close enough to the truth to be sustainable. I did work in an office, and I did handle paperwork, but humble enough to be invisible. I wanted to know if it was possible to be loved for my mind, for my kindness, for my soul, without the golden halo of wealth blinding the person looking at me. Then I met Grant. Grant Crowley came from money, or so I thought. I assumed that a man who grew up in a mansion would not be impressed by wealth. I thought he would be the one person safe enough to eventually trust with my secret. I thought we were playing on a level field. I was naive. I did not understand that for the Crowleys. Money was not just currency, it was oxygen, and they were suffocating. I walked over to the wall safe hidden behind a minimalist abstract painting in my office. My hand didn't tremble as I punched in the code. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside, there sat a single thick file folder bound in blue leather. I pulled it out and carried it to my desk. The label on the front read, Project Aegis. This was the irony that would haunt Grant for the rest of his miserable life. This was the secret I had been keeping. Not to hurt them, but to save them. I had known for 6 months that Crowley Enterprises was bleeding out. I had seen the audit reports. I knew about the bad loans Malcolm had taken to cover Vivian's gambling debts in Monte Carlo. I knew their liquidity was gone and that they were 2 missed payments away from defaulting on the estate. Project Aegis was my anniversary gift to Grant. It was a complex financial restructuring plan. I had set up a blind trust funded by my own private capital. The plan was to buy out their toxic debt, inject $50 million of liquidity into their company, and quietly steer them back toward profitability without them ever knowing it was me. I was going to save his family's legacy. I was going to pay off the house that Vivian had just kicked me out of. I was going to present this to him next week. I was going to sit him down, tell him the truth about who I was, and say, I love you. I have the means to fix this. Let us build a future where you do not have to be afraid of your father or your mother anymore. I had been ready to catch him when he fell. But he pushed me off the cliff instead. I opened the folder. The pages were crisp, filled with legal jargon and financial lifelines that would have secured the Crowley name for another century. It was an act of supreme love. It was a billion-dollar safety net woven by the wife they called a gold digger. I looked at the documents, and I felt a strange sensation. It was not sadness. It was the feeling of a weight being lifted. I had spent 2 years making myself smaller to fit into their box. I had dimmed my light so it would not hurt their eyes. I had pretended to be confused by simple investment terms when Grant ranted at dinner. Just to make him feel smart, I had worn cheap clothes so Vivian could feel superior. I had acted the part of the supporting character in their drama, when I was actually the producer of the entire show. You wanted a divorce, Grant, I said to the empty room, my voice steady and hard. You wanted a woman who fits your image. You wanted someone who understands the value of money. I took the first page of Project Aegis, the page that authorized the transfer of $50 million to the Crowley operational account, and I fed it into the shredder by my desk. The machine whirred, a hungry mechanical sound. The paper turned into confetti in seconds. I fed the next page, and the next. With every sheet that disappeared, I felt Cora the victim dying. In her place, Cora the CEO was taking full control. They had mocked my little job. They did not know that my little job allowed me to buy the bank that held their mortgage. They had mocked my cheap clothes. They did not know that the dress I wore to the divorce dinner was the only thing I owned that did not have a patent number attached to it. They had called me a parasite. I finished shredding the document. The blue leather folder was empty. The lifeline was cut. There would be no bailout. There would be no savior. I sat down at my computer and woke the screens. 3 monitors flared to life, displaying market trends, global news feeds, and the internal communications of North Star Quantum. I typed in a command to open a secure channel to my legal counsel, a man named Marcus who had been with me since the garage days. He answered on the first ring. Cora, Marcus said. His voice was alert. He knew I never called this late unless the world was ending or beginning. I saw the email about the asset review. Are we finally doing this? We are, I said, but the parameters have changed. Marcus, I do not just want a review. What do you need? I want total saturation, I said. I want to own the air they breathe. I want to buy the debt on the Crowley estate. I want to acquire the commercial loans for Crowley Enterprises. I want to look into the lease on the building where Delaney Price's father runs his consulting firm. There was a pause on the line. That is aggressive. Cora, that is a hostile acquisition of a family's entire existence. They wanted a business transaction, Marcus, I replied, leaning back in my chair. They filed for divorce. They declared that our relationship is now a legal matter, not a personal one. I am simply responding in kind. Understood, Marcus said. I could hear the smile in his voice. He had hated Grant since the wedding. When do we start? Now, I said. I want the notifications to hit their inboxes when they wake up tomorrow morning. I want Grant to choke on his coffee. Consider it done. I hung up. I stood and walked to the window again. The city lights were beautiful, a sprawling grid of ambition and power, somewhere out there, in the dark. Grant was probably sleeping in Delaney's arms, thinking he had upgraded, thinking he had secured his future. He had no idea that he had just declared war on a nuclear power. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. The reflection staring back at me was not the woman who had sat at the foot of the Crowley table tonight. That woman was gone. This woman was the architect, and I was about to dismantle their house, brick by brick. The morning sun sliced through the blinds of the secure conference room on the 45th floor of North Star Quantum. But inside, the atmosphere was as cold as a crypt. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. While Grant was likely just waking up to a breakfast prepared by a chef he could no longer afford, my war room was fully operational. I sat at the head of the obsidian table. On my right was Marcus, my general counsel. On my left was Elena, a forensic accountant I had poached from the IRS 3 years ago. She was the kind of woman who could find a missing penny in a budget of billions. Tell me the patient's condition, I said, leaning forward, my hands clasped. Elena tapped her tablet, and the massive screen on the wall illuminated with a complex web of red and black lines. It was the circulatory system of Crowley Enterprises. Terminal, Elena said, her voice flat. If they were a human being, they would be on life support. If they were a building, they would be condemned. I looked at the numbers, to the outside world. Crowley Enterprises was a legacy pillar of industry. They had shiny offices, a fleet of branded trucks, and the arrogance of a company that had been around for 50 years. But looking at the internal data we had legally harvested through public records, vendor credit reports, and industry filings, the truth was pathetic. Walk me through it, I commanded. It is a classic case of rot from the head down, Elena began, highlighting a section of the spreadsheet. Let us start with your husband, Grant. He is listed as the Chief Operating Officer. His salary is $600,000 a year, plus bonuses. And what does he actually do? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Nothing, Elena said. I tracked his email traffic and digital signature logs. He approves invoices without reviewing them. He signs off on vendor contracts that are 20% above market rate. Last quarter, he authorized a logistics upgrade that does not exist. The vendor was a shell company that vanished 2 weeks later. He lost the company $400,000 because he did not bother to run a background check. I felt a surge of validation mixed with disgust. Grant liked to play the exhausted executive at dinner, complaining about the weight of his responsibilities. In reality, he was an incompetent rubber stamp. He is not the villain, though, Elena continued, he is just the fool. The villain is here. She pointed to a cluster of transactions linked to Vivian Crowley. Vivian is not on the payroll officially, Elena explained, but she has a corporate credit card listed under Office Management in the last fiscal year alone. She has charged $350,000 to the company. I squinted at the line items. For what? Office supplies? If office supplies include first-class flights to Milan, spa treatments at the Mandarin Oriental, and a recurring monthly payment of $12,000 to a personal spiritual consultant, Elena said dryly, She is bleeding the company dry to maintain her lifestyle. She is treating the corporate accounts like her personal piggy bank. And Malcolm? I asked. He is the CEO. He has to know. He knows, Marcus interceded, sliding a file toward me. He is the one hiding it. Look at the debt structuring. Cora, Malcolm has been moving bad debt into subsidiary shell companies to keep them off the main balance sheet. He is playing a shell game. He takes a loan from Bank A to pay off the interest on Bank B, then opens a line of credit with Bank C to show liquidity to Bank A. I opened the file. It was a house of cards. A stiff breeze would knock it over. They are leveraged at 85%, Marcus noted. That is insane. Most companies panic at 40. They are drowning. Cora, they are just holding their breath so no one notices. They are insolvent, I whispered, the realization settling in. They are technically bankrupt right now. Correct, Elena said. But here is the kill shot. She pulled up a specific loan document. It was a commercial loan for $25 million from a mid-sized regional bank called Sterling Trust. This loan was taken out 2 years ago to cover a failed expansion into the Asian market, Elena explained. Malcolm was desperate, so he agreed to some very aggressive terms to get the cash fast. I scanned the document, my eyes hunting for the weakness, and then I found it. Clause 14b. The Covenant of Competence, I read aloud. Exactly, Marcus said, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. The bank added a clause stating that if the debt-to-equity ratio of Crowley Enterprises exceeds a certain threshold, or if the company fails to maintain a cash reserve of $2 million for 3 consecutive months, the lender has the right to call the full value of the loan immediately. They have to pay back the full $25 million instantly, I clarified. Instantly, Marcus confirmed. And if they cannot, the lender has the right to seize collateral. In this case, the collateral is the controlling stake in the company stock and the deed to the Crowley estate. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. Malcolm had bet the company and his house on his ability to juggle the books. He had signed a death warrant, thinking he could outsmart the math. Do they meet the cash reserve requirement? I asked. No, Elena said. They have been faking it by transferring personal funds in and out at the end of the month, but effectively, they have been in breach of contract for 6 months. Sterling Trust just has not noticed yet because they are a smaller bank, and Malcolm sends them nice fruit baskets. I looked at the screen. The path was clear. I did not need to scream. I did not need to throw a drink in Grant's face. I just needed to be a better business person than they were. Marcus, I said, my voice steady. Who holds the paper on that loan? Sterling Trust? Yes. And Sterling Trust is currently looking to improve their own liquidity for the upcoming fiscal quarter. Are they not? They are, Marcus nodded. They would likely be happy to get a risky loan off their books for cash. Buy it, I said. The room went silent. Buy the loan? Marcus asked, clarifying. You want to become their creditor? I want to own the debt, I said, but not as North Star Quantum. If they see my name or my company, they will fight it. Use the shadow firm we set up for the acquisition last year. What was it called? Orion Holdings? Orion Distressed Assets, Marcus corrected. It is a generic LLC registered in Delaware, completely untraceable to you without a court order. Perfect, I said. Contact Sterling Trust. Offer to buy the Crowley note for full face value. Tell them Orion specializes in high-risk debt collection and we want to take it off their hands. They will take the deal. They will be relieved to get rid of it. And once we own the note? Marcus asked. Once we own the note, I said, standing up and walking to the window. We enforce Clause 14b. We audit their cash reserves. We prove they are in breach. And then we demand the $25 million. They do not have $25 million, Elena said. They do not even have $2 million. I know, I said. That is the point. I looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, Grant was probably picking out a tie, thinking about his new life with Delaney. He was probably thinking about how free he felt now that he had shed the dead weight of his boring wife. He had no idea that the boring wife was currently negotiating the purchase of the guillotine that was hovering over his neck. "What about the other debts?" I asked, turning back to the table. "Vivian's credit cards? The mortgage on the commercial properties?" "Most of it is bundled," Marcus said. "If the sterling note gets called and they default, it triggers a cross-default on everything else. It is a domino effect. One push, and the whole empire falls." "Do it," I said. "Authorize the funds from my private trust. Have the paperwork signed by noon. I want Orion Holdings to be the legal owner of Grant Crowley's future by lunchtime." Marcus typed a command into his laptop. "Initiating contact with Sterling Trust now. The funds are staged." "One more thing," I said. "I want a private investigator to document Vivian's spending for the next 48 hours. I want receipts. I want photos of her buying jewelry while her company burns. When we reveal this, I want the shareholders to see exactly where their dividends went." "Consider it done," Marcus said. I looked at the red lines on the screen one last time. It was a map of greed and incompetence. For years, the Crowleys had acted like they were untouchable gods. They treated people like disposable tissues. They treated me like a mistake. But in the world of business, there are no gods. There is only leverage, and I had just bought all of it. "This is not revenge," I said to myself, though the others could hear me. "This is a market correction." I walked out of the conference room, leaving my team to execute the slaughter. The silence of the hallway felt heavy, but it was the heavy calm before a storm. I checked my watch. It was 8:30. Grant would be arriving at his office in an hour, strutting through the lobby, smiling at the receptionist, completely unaware that he was walking into a building he no longer really owned. I took out my phone and sent a text to my assistant. "Clear my schedule for Friday afternoon." That was when the note transfer would be finalized. That was when I would pull the trigger. I walked back to my office, the sound of my heels on the marble floor echoing like the ticking of a clock. Tick, tick, tick. Time was up. "Grant, you just didn't know it yet. The most dangerous thing about power is not using it. It is holding it in reserve." I could have crushed the Crowley family the moment the ink dried on the transfer documents from Sterling Trust. I could have had the sheriff's deputies evicting Vivian from her manor by Friday afternoon, but a quick execution is a mercy, and I was not feeling merciful. I wanted them to feel the ground crumble beneath their feet, inch by inch. I wanted them to wake up every morning feeling the air get a little thinner, the walls get a little closer, without knowing exactly why. So, I waited. For 3 weeks, I let them live in their delusion. Grant and Delaney were splashed across the local society pages, planning a welcome baby party that rivaled a royal coronation. Vivian was seen at the auction house, bidding on antique vases she definitely did not need. They were peacocking, strutting around the barnyard, completely unaware that the farmer had already sharpened the axe. While they were busy picking out floral arrangements, I was busy rewriting the rules of their industry. Crowley Enterprises made its money in third-party logistics and supply chain consulting. It was a middleman business, reliant on old relationships and even older software. They charged a premium because they claimed to have expert oversight. On a Tuesday morning, North Star Quantum released a new software platform called Q-Flow. We had been developing it for 2 years, but I moved the launch date up by 6 months. Q-Flow used artificial intelligence to optimize supply chains in real time, cutting out the need for human consultants entirely. It did everything Crowley Enterprises did, but it did it 90% faster and 60% cheaper. We offered it to the market as a subscription service. The impact was not immediate, but it was inevitable. It started as a tremor. I watched the data from my office. On day 1, 3 of Crowley's mid-sized clients canceled their contracts. They cited budget restructuring, but we knew the truth. They had signed up for Q-Flow. On day 7, their biggest client, a national retail chain that accounted for 30% of their annual revenue, announced they were not renewing their retainer. That was the earthquake. I had a contact inside the Crowley building, a junior analyst named Sarah, who I had mentored years ago before she took the job there. She did not know I was the owner of North Star, but she knew I was a friend. She texted me updates. "Grant is screaming in his office," she wrote. "He just threw a stapler at the wall. The revenue projections for next quarter are down by 40%. I sat in my office, sipping herbal tea, visualizing the chaos. Grant had never faced a real crisis in his life. Whenever things got hard, Malcolm called a friend, or Vivian wrote a check. But you cannot write a check to stop a technological revolution. By the second week, the exodus began. Talent knows when a ship is sinking. The smart ones leave first. The head of sales at Crowley, a woman who had single-handedly kept the company afloat for 5 years, resigned on a Monday morning. By Wednesday, she was sitting in an interview at North Star Quantum. I hired her on the spot, offering her a 20% raise and a signing bonus. Grant was left with the dead weight, the sycophants and the nepotism hires who had nowhere else to go. The stress began to bleed into their personal lives. I had my private investigator, a man named Mr. Vance, monitoring the situation. He sent me audio recordings from a microphone he had managed to plant in their favorite booth at the country club. I played the recording one evening while reviewing the daily reports. "I do not understand why you cannot just fix it, Grant." Delaney's voice was sharp, lacking its usual sultry purr. "My father says the market is fine. Why is your company the only one losing money?" "It is not just us," Grant snapped. His voice sounded thin, frayed. "This new software, this North Star thing, it is killing everyone. We just need to ride it out." "Ride it out?" Delaney scoffed. "With what? Vivian told me you are freezing the dividends this quarter. Grant, I have medical bills. The baby needs things. We have the nursery renovation scheduled." "Can we not talk about money for 5 minutes?" Grant pleaded. "I am trying to save the business." "Well, try harder," Delaney said coldly, "because I did not sign up for struggling artist lifestyle. Grant, if I wanted that, I would have stayed with my tennis instructor." I paused the recording and smiled. There it was. The mask was slipping. Delaney Price was not interested in standing by her man during the storm. She was looking for the nearest lifeboat. Vivian was handling the pressure with even less grace. Her spending habits, which were pathological on a good day, turned manic. She was trying to spend away the fear. Mr. Vance sent me photos of her leaving a high-end jewelry store, arguing with a clerk. Apparently, her platinum card had been declined. She had made a scene, screaming about banking errors and incompetence before storming out. She called Malcolm immediately after. I had the transcript of that call, too. "Fix the accounts. Malcolm," she shrieked. "I was humiliated. The card was declined for a $5,000 bracelet. Do you know who I am?" "Vivian, please." Malcolm sounded like a ghost. "Cash flow is tight. The clients are leaving. We have to be careful." "I do not do careful," she yelled. "I am a Crowley. Make it work." She hung up. They were turning on each other. The pressure cooker was sealed, and the heat was rising. But I was not done turning the dial. It was time to introduce the legal element. I called Marcus into my office. "Send the letter," I said. "The demand for payment?" Marcus asked, his finger hovering over his tablet. "No," I corrected. "Not yet. That is too fast. Send the notice of compliance audit." The notice of compliance audit was a standard procedure for a creditor, but to a company hiding financial rot, it was a declaration of war. It stated that Orion Holdings, the new owner of their debt, had identified irregularities in their quarterly filings and would be sending an independent team to verify their assets and cash reserves within 48 hours. It was a polite way of saying, "We know you are lying, and we are coming to prove it." The letter was delivered by courier at 10 o'clock the next morning. According to Sarah's text updates, the effect was immediate. Grant just locked himself in his office with Malcolm. She wrote, "I heard glass breaking. The lawyers are running down the hall." I could imagine the scene perfectly. Grant, sweating through his expensive shirt, reading the words Orion Holdings and having no idea who they were, only knowing that they held the power to destroy him. Malcolm, realizing that his shell game was about to be exposed. They would scramble. They would try to cook the books. They would try to move money around to show the $2 million in liquid cash required by the covenant. But they couldn't, because I had already blocked their exits. I had spent the last week quietly acquiring the smaller vendor debts they owed: the landscaping company, the catering service, the IT maintenance firm. I bought their overdue invoices for pennies on the dollar. When Malcolm tried to move cash from a subsidiary to cover the main account, he would find that the subsidiary's accounts were frozen due to pending litigation from those smaller vendors. I had them in a stranglehold. That evening, Grant called me. I stared at the phone buzzing on my desk. His name flashed on the screen. Hubby. I had not changed the contact name yet. It felt like a relic from a different geological era. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Hello?" I said, my voice calm, uninterested. "Cora?" Grant sounded breathless, like he had been running. "Cora, I need to talk to you." My lawyer said all communication should go through him. "Grant," I said, "we are in the middle of a divorce, remember? You were quite clear about the terms." I know, he stammered. "Look, this is not about the divorce. It is, I need a favor, a big one." "A favor?" I almost laughed. "You kicked me out of my home, Grant. You humiliated me in front of your mistress, and you are calling for a favor?" "I know I messed up," he said, his voice cracking. "I am under a lot of stress. But listen, Cora, you have some savings, right? From your grandmother? I remember you mentioning a small inheritance once." I gripped the phone. He was not calling to apologize. He was calling to loot me. He remembered a lie I had told him years ago about a $50,000 inheritance from a grandmother. Money I pretended to set aside for a rainy day. "Why?" I asked, testing him. "I just need a short-term loan," he said, the desperation leaking through. "Just for a few days, to cover a bookkeeping error at the company. I will pay you back double, I swear." "Double?" I asked. "I thought I was a gold digger. Grant, why would you want to give me money?" "Cora, please," he shouted, losing his composure. "I am in trouble. If I do not show liquidity by Friday, we could lose everything. Just tell me you have the money." "I do not have it," I said flatly. "What do you mean you do not have it?" "I spent it," I lied. "I had to put a deposit down on a new apartment because my husband threw me onto the street." There was a silence on the other end, a heavy, suffocating silence. "You are useless," he hissed. "You were always useless." He hung up. I put the phone down gently. The insult did not sting. It felt like a confirmation. He had not changed. He had not learned. He was still the same weak, entitled boy who thought the world owed him a living. But fear had entered the building. Real, visceral fear. Grant had looked into the abyss, and for the first time, he realized the abyss had teeth. I turned back to my computer screens. The stock price of Crowley Enterprises had dropped another 7% that afternoon. The market smelled the blood in the water. Delaney was pulling away. Vivian was cracking. Grant was begging. They were ripe. "Marcus," I said into the intercom, "prepare the team. We go in on Friday." "The audit team?" Marcus asked. "No," I said. "The acquisition team. We are not just going to audit them. We are going to offer them a lifeline." "You are going to bail them out?" Marcus sounded confused. "No," I smiled, though no one could see it. "I am going to invite them to a meeting to save their company. I want them to have hope. I want them to think they have found a savior." "And then?" "And then," I said, "I am going to walk through the door." It was the cruelest part of the plan, to give a drowning man a hand, only to let him see that the hand belongs to the person he tried to drown. I leaned back in my chair. The city lights below seemed to twinkle just for me. The stage was set. The actors were in place. All that was left was the final act. The invitation from Orion Holdings had been precise. It requested the presence of the entire executive board of Crowley Enterprises, along with any significant shareholders, for a mandatory strategy meeting at 10 o'clock on Friday morning. The location was the penthouse suite of the Millennium Tower. the steel and glass needle that pierced the skyline of the financial district. To them, this meeting was a lifeline. They believed they were coming to meet a mysterious investor who specialized in distressed assets, someone who might inject cash into their dying company and save them from the humiliation of bankruptcy. To me, it was the closing argument. I stood in the observation room adjacent to the main conference hall. The wall between us was made of one-way smart glass. I could see every pore on their faces, but they could only see their own reflections. They arrived at 9:45. Punctuality is the virtue of the desperate. Vivian led the procession. She was wearing a Chanel suit that I knew for a fact she had purchased on credit 2 days ago. Her head was held high, her face a mask of imperious boredom, but her hands were trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. She was terrified. Malcolm followed her, looking gray and shrunken. The bluster was gone. He looked like a man walking to the gallows who was still hoping the governor would call. Then came Grant and Delaney. Grant looked exhausted. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his tie was knotted a little too tight, as if he were slowly strangling himself. He kept checking his phone, likely hoping for a miracle wire transfer that was never coming. Delaney was the most interesting. She looked annoyed. She was wearing a loose-fitting designer dress to accommodate the early stages of the pregnancy that had been her golden ticket. She scanned the room not with fear, but with calculation. She was already appraising the furniture, wondering how much the art on the walls was worth. She wasn't worried about the company. She was worried about her settlement. "Please, take a seat," my assistant, Sarah, said. She was playing the role of the neutral receptionist perfectly. "The director will be with you shortly." "Director?" Vivian sniffed, sitting down and smoothing her skirt. "I thought we were meeting with the managing partner. We are not here to speak with some middle manager." "The director handles all high-level acquisitions," Sarah said politely. "Can I get you anything while you wait? Water? Coffee?" "Sparkling water," Delaney said, not looking up from her phone. "With lime." "Just water for me," Grant said. "We do not want anything," Malcolm muttered. "We just want to get this over with." Sarah nodded and left the room, closing the heavy soundproof doors behind her. The click of the lock was audible over the speakers in my observation room. Now the waiting game began. I let them sit there. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. "This is ridiculous," Vivian hissed, drumming her fingers on the polished mahogany table. "Do they not know who we are? We are the Crowleys. We do not wait." "We do wait, Vivian," Malcolm said, his voice weary. "We wait because they own our debt. They own the roof over our heads. If they want us to wait all day, we wait all day." "I told you this would happen," Grant said, rubbing his temples. "We should have sold the logistics division last year when we had the chance." "Oh, stop whining, Grant," Delaney snapped. "You did not sell it because you wanted to play CEO, and now look at us, sitting in some anonymous boardroom begging for scraps." "I am not begging," Grant shot back. "I am negotiating." "You are broke," Delaney said. "There is a difference." I watched them turn on each other like rats in a bucket. It was fascinating. The veneer of family unity had completely dissolved. There was no love in that room. There was only blame. 15 minutes. I adjusted the lapel of my jacket. I had chosen my outfit carefully. A sharp, white-tailored suit that cost more than Grant's car. My hair was down, sleek and straight. I wore no jewelry except for a simple, platinum watch. I looked nothing like the frantic, disheveled wife they had kicked out 3 weeks ago. I looked like money. "Okay," I whispered to myself. "Showtime." I walked out of the observation room and down the short hallway to the conference room double doors. 2 security guards stood there. They nodded at me. "Open it," I said. The doors swung open with a heavy pneumatic hiss. I walked in. I did not look at them immediately. I walked straight to the head of the table, my heels clicking on the marble floor with a rhythmic, commanding authority. I carried a single leather folder. I placed it on the table. I took my time adjusting the chair. The silence in the room was absolute. Then the confusion started. "Cora?" It was Grant. His voice was a mixture of bewilderment and irritation. He did not sound scared yet. He just sounded confused, as if he had found his dog sitting at the dinner table. I ignored him. I sat down, interlaced my fingers, and looked up. Vivian was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. Her eyes darted from me to the door, expecting someone else to walk in behind me. "What on earth are you doing here?" Vivian demanded, her shock quickly turning into her default setting of outrage. "Did you follow us? Grant, I told you she was obsessed." "Cora, you cannot be here," Grant said, standing up. "This is a private business meeting. We are waiting for the director of Orion Holdings. You need to leave before security drags you out." "Yeah, this is really embarrassing. Cora," Delaney said, rolling her eyes. "Are you stalking us now? Go back to your little admin job." I looked at them. I let the silence stretch, heavy and thick. I looked at Grant, the man who had vowed to protect me. I looked at Vivian, the woman who had tormented me. I looked at Delaney, the woman who had stolen my life. And then I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who has just closed the cage door. "Sit down, Grant," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried a weight they had never heard before. It was the voice I used to command boardrooms. It was the voice that moved markets. "Excuse me?" Grant blinked. I said, "Sit down." "Who do you think you are talking to?" Vivian screeched. "Get out! I will have you arrested. I will—" "You will be quiet, Vivian." I cut her off. I did not shout. I did not have to. "You are not in your dining room anymore. You are in my building, and in my building, you speak when you are spoken to." "Your building?" Malcolm asked. He was the first one to realize something was wrong. He was looking at me with a dawning horror. "What do you mean, your building?" I reached into the leather folder and pulled out a single document. I slid it across the long, polished table. It spun perfectly, coming to a stop right in front of Malcolm. It was the deed to the Crowley estate. "I mean," I said, "that I am the director of Orion Holdings. I am the one who bought your debt from Sterling Trust. I am the one who owns the mortgage on your house. And I am the one deciding whether or not you all sleep on the street tonight." The room seemed to tilt. Grant fell back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. "No, that is impossible. You are a secretary." "I was never a secretary, Grant," I said. "I own North Star Quantum." "North Star?" Delaney whispered. Her hand went to her throat. "The tech company? The one worth billions?" $42 billion, as of this morning, I corrected. "Give or take a few $100 million depending on the market fluctuation." Vivian made a sound like a strangling cat. She grabbed the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "You are lying. You are a liar. You are a waitress's daughter. You have nothing." "I have everything, Vivian," I said. "I have your loans. I have your credit card statements. I have the receipts for the jewelry you bought last week while your employees were being laid off. I have it all." I stood up and walked slowly around the table. I moved like a shark circling a life raft. "You called me a gold digger," I said softly. Stopping behind Grant's chair, I could smell his fear. It smelled like sweat and expensive cologne. "You humiliated me. You treated me like I was beneath you because you thought I was poor. That was my only crime in your eyes, lack of money." I leaned down, bringing my face close to his ear. "But here is the irony. Grant, I was the richest person in the room the night you divorced me. I could have bought your entire family 10 times over and still had enough left to buy a small country." Grant turned to look at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a terrifying mixture of regret and realization. "Cora, why? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to be loved," I said, straightening up. "I wanted to know if you loved me, or if you just loved the lifestyle, and you gave me my answer, loud and clear." I walked over to Delaney. She shrank back in her chair, trying to make herself small. "And you," I said, looking down at her, "you thought you won the prize. You thought you stole the rich husband." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Congratulations, Delaney. You stole a man with 0 assets, a mountain of debt, and a mother who will make your life a living hell. You can keep him." "This is illegal," Malcolm stammered, his face pale. Conflict of interest. You cannot do this." "It is perfectly legal." "Malcolm," I said, walking back to the head of the table, "my lawyers have triple-checked every statute. I bought your debt on the open market. You are in breach of covenant, Clause 14b. You owe me $25 million, payable immediately." "We do not have it," Malcolm whispered. "I know," I said. "That is why we are here." I sat back down. "I am not going to extend your line of credit," I said. "I am not going to refinance your loans. I am going to foreclose. I am going to take the company. I am going to take the house. I am going to take everything." "You cannot do that to family," Vivian screamed, tears finally streaming down her face. "We are your family." "No, Vivian," I said, cold as ice. "You made it very clear 3 weeks ago. I am not family. I am a mistake, remember?" I looked at my watch. "You have 24 hours to vacate the estate. My security team will be there tomorrow morning to change the locks. As for the company, my auditors are already in the building. Grant, you are fired. Malcolm, you are fired. Vivian, your corporate card has been canceled." "Cora, please," Grant begged. He reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. "Please, we can work this out. I love you. I was confused. The baby. It was a mistake. I will leave her. I will leave Delaney right now. Just give me another chance." Delaney gasped. "Grant." I looked at Grant's hand, then at his face. It was pathetic. There was no dignity left in him. He was willing to throw his pregnant mistress under the bus to save his bank account. "You are disgusting," I said. I pressed a button on the intercom. "Security, escort the former owners of Crowley Enterprises out of the building." The doors opened, and 4 large security guards stepped in. "Cora!" Grant shouted as the guards moved toward them. "You cannot do this. I am your husband." "Not for long," I said. "My lawyers will be sending over the updated divorce papers. I think you will find the settlement offer is quite 0. They were dragged out. Vivian was sobbing. Grant was shouting. Malcolm was silent, broken. Delaney looked like she was about to be sick. I sat alone in the silent conference room. I looked at the empty chairs. It was done. The secret was out. The bomb had detonated. I reached out and touched the cool leather of the folder. I felt a strange sense of calm. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was the satisfaction of balance restored. They had tried to destroy me with their arrogance. I had destroyed them with the truth. I stood up and walked to the window. Far below, on the sidewalk, I could see 4 tiny figures being escorted out of the building entrance. They looked like ants. "Goodbye, Grant," I whispered. I turned away from the window. I had a company to run, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't have to hide who I was. "Wait," I commanded. My voice was not loud, but it stopped the security guards in their tracks, just as they were hauling Grant by the elbows toward the double doors. The room froze. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume turning sour with sweat. "Bring them back," I said, leaning back in my chair. I almost forgot the most important part, the exit interview. The guards hesitated, then turned the group around. Grant looked at me, a flicker of pathetic hope igniting in his eyes. He thought I was relenting. He thought the wife who used to iron his shirts was resurfacing to save him from the mean, scary CEO. He was wrong. They shuffled back to the table. Vivian was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, her mascara running in jagged black lines. Malcolm was staring at the floor. Delaney looked bored, checking her nails, clearly calculating her next move. And then there was Sloane. I had almost forgotten about Sloane Crowley, Grant's younger sister, a silent member of the board who had spent the last 5 years collecting a 6-figure salary to show up at charity galas. She had been sitting at the far end of the table, so quiet I had barely registered her presence until now. "Why are we back here?" Vivian snapped, her voice trembling but still managing to hold that grating tone of entitlement. "Have you decided to stop this charade, Cora?" Sit down, I said. They sat. I realized I was not clear enough, I began, opening the second leather folder that had been sitting on the table. I told you that I was taking everything, but I did not tell you why it was so easy. I pulled out a stack of documents, paper-clipped into neat bundles. You see, companies do not die from murder, I said, sliding the first bundle toward Malcolm. They die from suicide, and you four have been poisoning the well for years. Malcolm reached for the papers with shaking hands. That is a forensic accounting of the consulting fees paid to the shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, I said. The one you set up, Malcolm. Malcolm went white. You have been siphoning off 3% of the gross revenue for 5 years, I continued. You told the board it was for international expansion research, but according to the bank records I subpoenaed, the only thing expanding was your mistress's wardrobe in Paris. Vivian gasped, turning to her husband. Malcolm, you said the business was just slow. Oh, save the outrage, Vivian, I said, cutting her off. I slid the second bundle across the table. It landed in front of her. You are not exactly a martyr. Vivian looked down at the papers. They were copies of credit card statements and invoices. You embezzled $1.2 million from the employee pension fund, I stated. The room went dead silent. Even the security guards looked uncomfortable. Stealing from a pension fund was a special kind of low. I borrowed it, Vivian stammered. For the estate renovations, I intended to pay it back. With what? I asked. With the money Malcolm was stealing? Or with the money Grant was losing? I turned my eyes to Grant. He was looking back and forth between his parents like a child waking up in a haunted house. And that brings us to you. Grant, I said. I never stole anything, Grant said quickly. I was loyal. I tried my best. Loyal? I let out a short, sharp laugh. Grant, you were not a criminal. You were just a puppet. And the saddest part is, you did not even see the strings. I picked up a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of an email chain. Do you recognize this email address? I asked, holding it up. Grant narrowed his eyes. That is Delaney's father's email. Read the date, I said. He squinted. August 12th, 2 years ago. And when did you meet Delaney? I asked. 6 months ago, Grant said. He paused. The math clicked in his head. Wait. This is an email from Vivian to Delaney's father, I explained, my voice clinical. Subject line, Operation Merger. In it, they discuss the terms of introducing Delaney to you. They discuss the accidental meetings. They discuss the timeline for getting you to leave your unsuitable wife. I watched the realization hit him. It was physical. He flinched as if I had slapped him. It was a setup, I said ruthlessly. Vivian knew the company was failing. She needed cash. Delaney's family has political connections, but they are cash poor. They needed the Crowley name to secure a loan. It was a merger. Grant, you were not falling in love. You were being traded like a head of cattle. Grant slowly turned his head to look at Delaney. Delaney did not flinch. She did not cry. She simply closed her folder and sighed. It is not that dramatic, Grant, Delaney said, her voice devoid of the husky warmth she used to fake. It is how our world works. Arrangements are made. You were unhappy. I was available. It made sense. You knew? Grant whispered. The baby. The baby is real. Delaney shrugged. But let us be honest. I am not raising a child in a one-bedroom apartment with a bankrupt executive. My lawyers will be in touch regarding child support, though I suspect you will not be able to pay it. You are leaving me? Grant asked, his voice breaking. Honey, you are unemployed and homeless, Delaney said, standing up. I am practical. I do not do struggle love. She looked at me. Can I go now? Or do you have more receipts? Go, I said. I have no quarrel with you. Delaney, you are a predator. But at least you are honest about it. These people, I gestured to the Crowleys, are hypocrites. Delaney walked out without looking back. Grant sat there, destroyed. The three pillars of his life, his father's integrity, his mother's love, and his mistress's passion, had all collapsed in the span of 5 minutes. And finally, I said, turning to the end of the table, Sloane? Sloane jumped. She was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. I did not do anything, Sloane whispered. I just signed where Daddy told me to sign. That is the problem, Sloane, I said. Negligence is a liability. You are on the board. You approved the fraudulent audits. You signed the checks that drained the pension fund. I did not know, she cried, tears spilling over. I just wanted my allowance. Well, the allowance is gone, I said. And because you are a board member, you are personally liable for the debts. Your trust fund? Seized. Your condo in Aspen? Seized. Your vintage car collection? Mine. Sloane let out a wail that sounded like a siren. But I have nothing else. I cannot work. I do not know how to do anything. Then I suggest you learn, I said. I hear the service industry is hiring. My mother was a waitress. It is honest work. You should try it. I closed the folder. The sound was like a gavel striking a block. This meeting is adjourned, I said. Cora, Grant said. He was crying now, ugly, heaving sobs. Please, I am sorry. I was stupid. I was so stupid. I will do anything. I will sign anything. Just do not destroy us completely. Do not leave me with nothing. I looked at him. I looked for the anger, the hurt, the love. I searched my heart for any lingering emotion for this man. There was nothing, just a vast, empty silence. I am not destroying you, Grant, I said, standing up and smoothing my suit. I am simply balancing the books. You treated people like commodities. Now you know what it feels like to be liquidated. I pressed the intercom button again. Take them out, I said. And this time, if they resist, call the police and have them charged with trespassing. The guards moved in. This time, there was no fight left in them. Malcolm slumped in the grip of the guard. Vivian was muttering to herself, broken. Sloane was sobbing into her hands. Grant looked at me one last time as he was pulled toward the door. Who are you? He whispered. I am the woman you should have invested in, I said. The doors closed. The silence returned. I stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. I turned to Marcus, who had been sitting silently in the corner, witnessing the execution. Get the legal team on the pension fund reimbursement, I said, shifting instantly back to business mode. I want the employees made whole. Use the assets seized from Malcolm's private accounts. If that is not enough, pull it from the North Star philanthropic budget. You are going to cover their theft? Marcus asked, surprised. The employees did not steal anything, I said. I will not let innocent people suffer for Crowley greed. Clean it up, Marcus. I want the acquisition finalized by 5 o'clock. Rename the company. Strip the Crowley name off the building by tomorrow morning. What should we call it? Marcus asked. I thought for a second. Phoenix Logistics, I said. Because we are going to burn it down and build something better from the ashes. Understood, Marcus said. I picked up my folders. I walked out of the conference room, leaving the ghosts of my marriage behind. I had a meeting with my product development team in 20 minutes. I was late, and unlike the Crowleys, I had work to do. The security guards had successfully corralled the Crowley family into the waiting area by the main elevators, a sleek expanse of gray marble and brushed steel that felt more like a mausoleum than a lobby. They were not leaving quietly. Vivian was weeping, a high, thin sound that grated on the nerves. Grant was arguing with a guard who was twice his size, while Malcolm stood staring at the floor, looking as if he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. I could have let them go. I could have stayed in my office, turned my back, and let the doors close on this chapter of my life. But there was one final piece of business, one final ghost that needed to be laid to rest. I walked out of the conference room and down the hall. The sound of my heels announced my approach, and the group fell silent as I neared. Are you here to gloat? Grant asked, His voice was raw, his eyes red-rimmed. "Have you not done enough? You took the company. You took the house. What else do you want? Cora? The clothes off our backs?" "I am not here to gloat, Grant," I said quietly. I held a tablet in my hand. "I am here to show you what you threw away. Not the money, not the assets, but the intent." I tapped the screen and turned the tablet toward them. Displayed on it was the cover page of Project Aegis, the document I had shredded in my office the night of the divorce dinner. But digital backups are eternal. "What is this?" Malcolm asked, squinting at the screen. "This," I said, my voice steady, "was my anniversary gift to you, Grant. I prepared this 2 months ago." I swiped to the executive summary. "It is a restructuring plan," I explained. "Fully funded by my private trust. $50 million in immediate capital injection to clear the debts, a buyout of the Sterling Trust loan, a renovation budget for the estate to fix the roof you have been neglecting, and a strategic partnership with North Star Quantum to modernize your logistics division." The silence that fell over the hallway was heavier than the one in the boardroom. It was the silence of absolute, crushing realization. Vivian stopped crying. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at the numbers on the screen. $50 million, as if they were holy scripture. You were going to pay it?" Vivian whispered. Her voice trembled with a horror I had never heard before. "You were going to save us?" "I was going to save you," I corrected her. "I was going to pay off every debt you had. I was going to let you keep your title. Malcolm, I was going to let you keep your dignity. Vivian, I was going to do it anonymously, through a trust, so Grant would never feel inferior to his wife. I was going to let you believe you had fixed it yourselves." I looked at Grant. He was pale, his face slack with shock. "Why?" he croaked. "Because I loved you," I said. "Because I thought that beneath the arrogance and the fear, there was a good man. I thought that if I took the financial pressure off your shoulders, you might finally become the husband I needed." I turned to Vivian. "You called me a gold digger. Vivian, you told everyone who would listen that I was a parasite, but the truth is, I was the host, and you were so busy trying to poison me that you did not realize I was the only thing keeping you alive." Vivian made a sound like a wounded animal. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. The imperious matriarch was gone. In her place was an old woman who realized she had just burned the winning lottery ticket because she didn't like the paper it was printed on. "Oh God," Vivian sobbed into her hands. "Oh my God, I did this. I did this." It was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy of her own design. Grant took a step toward me. He reached out, his hand trembling. "Cora," he said, his voice desperate, pleading. "Cora, listen to me. We can fix this. I did not know. How could I have known? If I had known you could help." "That is exactly the point, Grant," I cut him off. "You only want me now because you know what I'm worth. You do not want Cora. You want the $50 million. No, I swear." He fell to his knees. It was a pathetic sight. A man in a $3,000 suit, kneeling on the cold marble floor of an office building. "I love you. I always loved you. I was just lost. I was scared of my mother. I was scared of failing. Please, Cora, take me back. Let me prove it to you. We can start over. Just you and me. I will sign a post-nuptial. I will do anything." I looked down at him. I remembered the man I had met at the gala. I remembered the man I had cooked dinner for. I searched for him in Grant's eyes, but he wasn't there. All I saw was a terrified child who wanted his toys back. "Stand up, Grant," I said coldly. "You are embarrassing yourself." "Please," he wept. "The answer is no," I said. "The Grant I loved is dead. He died the moment he let his mother humiliate me at that dinner table. You chose your side. You chose Delaney." At the mention of her name, we all looked toward the elevator bank. Delaney was standing there, pressing the call button repeatedly. She had not left yet. She had been watching the entire scene with a look of mild disgust. Delaney? Grant turned to her, hope flickering again. Delaney, tell her. Tell her it was just a mistake. Delaney scoffed. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. Grant, look at you, she said, shaking her head. You are on your knees begging your ex-wife for cash. It is pathetic. I am done. Do not call me. Do not text me. And do not worry about the baby. My lawyers will contact you to relinquish your parental rights. I do not want your DNA complicating my future. She stepped into the elevator. Wait, Grant scrambled up and ran toward the doors. Delaney, you cannot just leave. She pressed the close door button. She looked him right in the eye as the steel doors slid shut, cutting him off from his backup plan. He stood there, staring at the closed doors, completely alone. He turned back to me, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Malcolm finally spoke up. He stepped forward, wringing his hands. Ms. Freeman, he said, using my last name for the first time. Cora, please, we need time. You cannot just throw us out on the street. We have nowhere to go. We have no liquidity. Give us a month, just 30 days to find a place, to sort out our affairs. I looked at Malcolm, the man who had cooked the books, the man who had sneered at my background. I cannot give you time, Malcolm, I said, but I will give you a choice. A choice? Hope flared in his eyes. Option 1, I held up one finger. You, Vivian, and Grant sign a full confession regarding the embezzlement of the pension fund and the fraudulent accounting practices. You admit to it all in writing. In exchange, I will not press criminal charges. I will let you walk away. I will give you a small stipend, $5,000 each, to find a motel and get some food. And I will allow you to keep one personal vehicle. And option 2? Grant asked. Option 2, I said, my voice hardening. I hand these files to the district attorney this afternoon. You go to prison for fraud and embezzlement. Vivian goes to prison for grand larceny. And Grant? Well, Grant goes down as an accessory. Malcolm went pale. Prison? Those are the terms, I said. You lose your fortune, or you lose your freedom. Pick one. We will sign, Malcolm said immediately. We will sign. Malcolm, Vivian shrieked. You cannot. My reputation. Your reputation is dead, Vivian, Malcolm shouted at her, his composure finally snapping. It is over. Look at where we are. We are done. Vivian recoiled, shocking into silence. Good choice, I said. I pulled a document from the folder. I had prepared it in advance, knowing they would fold. Sign here, and here, and here. I handed Malcolm a pen. He signed it against the wall, his hand shaking so hard the signature was barely legible. He passed the pen to Vivian. She signed it through her tears. Grant signed last. He did not look at the paper. He just stared at me, his eyes dead. There, Grant whispered, handing the pen back to me. Are you happy now? I took the paper. I checked the signatures. No, Grant, I said honestly. I am not happy. This is not a victory. It is a funeral. I am just the one burying the bodies. I signaled to the guards. Escort them out of the building, I ordered, and ensure they do not re-enter. Cora, Grant said one last time as the guard took his arm. What are you going to do? I am going to work, I said. I turned my back on them. I heard the elevator doors open again. I heard the shuffling of feet. I heard Vivian sobbing softly, and then I heard the doors close. I stood there in the hallway for a long moment. I looked at the tablet in my hand, the digital ghost of the $50 million I had been ready to give away for love. I deleted the file. Goodbye, I whispered into the empty air. I straightened my spine, took a deep breath, and walked back toward my office. My assistant, Sarah, was waiting by the door. Is it done? She asked softly. It is done, I said. Schedule a meeting with the rebranding team. And Sarah? Yes, Director? Order lunch, I said. I am starving. I walked into my office and sat down at my desk. The sun was high in the sky now, bathing the city in a harsh, bright light. The shadows were gone. I was alone, but for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't lonely. I was free. The 30 days following the meeting at the Millennium Tower passed not like a month, but like the slow, grinding turn of a millstone. The destruction of the Crowley Empire was total. It was not a quiet fade into obscurity. It was a public demolition. Because they had signed the confession to avoid prison, the transfer of assets was swift and brutal. My legal team moved with the efficiency of a swarm of locusts. We seized the accounts. We seized the luxury vehicles. We seized the vacation homes in the Hamptons and the ski lodge in Aspen. The headlines were relentless. The local papers, once filled with glowing puffs pieces about Vivian's charity galas, now ran stories with titles like The Crowley Collapse, A Legacy Built on Fraud, and From Billions to Bust, The Fall of a Dynasty. Vivian Crowley, the woman who would not be caught dead in last season's fashion, was photographed moving into a 2-bedroom rental apartment in a working-class neighborhood on the edge of town. The picture of her struggling with a cardboard box while wearing a tracksuit became an internet meme overnight. Malcolm suffered a minor stroke the week after the signing. It was stress-induced. He survived. But the medical bills from the state hospital were already piling up. A cruel irony for a man who used to steal from pension funds to pay for private doctors. And Grant. Grant became a ghost. Delaney Price did exactly what she said she would do. She vanished. 2 weeks ago, a tabloid ran a photo of her on a yacht in the Mediterranean, hanging on the arm of a 70-year-old oil tycoon. She looked radiant. She looked pregnant. She looked rich. She had successfully aborted her connection to the Crowley disaster and grafted herself onto a new host. Grant was just a stepping stone she had stepped on, realized was loose, and discarded. Grant was left with nothing. No wife, no mistress, no child, no job, and as of this morning, no home. Today was the final act, the foreclosure auction of the Crowley estate. It was taking place on the front steps of the county courthouse. It was a crisp, bright morning, the kind of day that felt like a new beginning. I arrived in my town car, but I told the driver to park around the block. I wanted to walk. I wanted to feel the pavement under my feet. I was wearing a black trench coat and sunglasses, not to hide, but to observe. A crowd had gathered, real estate sharks, developers looking to tear the manor down and build condos, and the curious onlookers who just wanted to see the carcass of a giant being picked clean. I stood at the back near a stone pillar, and then I saw him. Grant was standing near the bottom of the steps. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost 20 pounds. His suit was ill-fitting, likely the only one he had managed to keep, and it was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved in days. He looked like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to matter. He was watching the auctioneer set up the podium with a look of hollow devastation. That house was his identity. It was the only thing that made him a Crowley. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice boomed over the portable speaker, "we are here to auction the property located at 100 Crowley Lane. Minimum bid starts at $5 million. It was a steal. The land alone was worth 10. $5 million? A man in a beige coat shouted. 5.5, a woman near the front countered. 6 million, the beige coat replied. I watched Grant flinch with every number. Each bid was a stranger claiming a piece of his history. Each million was a reminder of what he had squandered. I waited until the bidding slowed at $8 million. $8 million going once, the auctioneer called out. $8 million going twice. I stepped forward. I did not shout. I simply raised my hand. $10 million, I said. The crowd turned. A hush rippled through the group. They recognized me, or rather, they recognized the aura of money. The man in the beige coat looked at me, saw the set of my jaw, and shook his head. He knew when he was beaten. I have $10 million from the lady in black, the auctioneer said, sensing the tension. Do I hear 10.5? 11? Silence. Going once, the auctioneer said. Grant turned slowly. He locked eyes with me. His mouth parted slightly. Going twice, the auctioneer continued. I held Grant's gaze. I did not blink. Called. The gavel cracked against the podium. To the lady in black for $10 million. It was over. I owned the house where Vivian had mocked my mother. I owned the dining room where Grant had asked for a divorce. I owned the bedroom where he had betrayed me. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring excitedly about the mystery buyer. I walked toward the clerk to sign the initial paperwork. Grant did not move. He stood there like a statue in the stream of people flowing around him. After I signed the papers, I walked down the steps. I had to pass him to get to my car. I could have walked right past him. I could have treated him like a stranger, but he stepped into my path. "You bought it," he said. His voice was raspy, broken. "I did," I replied, stopping. "Why?" Grant asked. "You hate that house. You hated living there. Mother made your life hell in those halls. Why would you want it?" "I do not want it, Grant," I said calmly. "Then why spend $10 million on it?" "Because I could not let anyone else live in a monument to your family's greed," I said. "I am not going to live there. I am not going to rent it out." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to bulldoze it," I said. Grant recoiled as if I had struck him. "You? You are going to destroy it?" "I am going to flatten it," I said, "and then I am going to donate the land to the city. I have already drawn up the plans. It will be a public park. The Vivian Crowley Memorial Park? No, I think I will just call it the Freedom Garden. A place where people from the city, people like my mother, people you look down on, can come and walk on the grass you thought was too good for them." Tears welled up in Grant's eyes. "You are cruel, Cora. I never knew you could be this cruel." "I learned from the best," I said. He looked down at his scuffed shoes. "I applied for a job yesterday," he whispered. "At a logistics firm, a junior analyst position, entry level." "Did you get it?" I asked. "No." He laughed bitterly. "The hiring manager recognized my name. He laughed me out of the office. He said he does not hire fraud risks." "That is unfortunate," I said. "But actions have consequences." "I miss you," he blurted out. "Not the money. I swear, I miss the way you used to look at me, like I was a hero. No one has ever looked at me like that. Delaney never looked at me like that. I looked at you like a hero because I was projecting my own strength onto you." I said, "I thought you were holding me up. I did not realize I was the one carrying you." I adjusted my sunglasses. "I have to go. Grant, I have a board meeting at 2:00. "Cora." He reached out, but he stopped himself before he touched my sleeve. He knew he no longer had the right. "What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at him one last time. I saw the fear, the helplessness, and for the first time, I felt absolutely nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was just a blank space where he used to be. "I do not know, Grant," I said, "and for the first time in my life, it is not my job to figure it out for you." I stepped around him. "Goodbye." I walked to the corner where my car was waiting. The driver opened the door. I slid into the warm leather interior. "Where to, Ms. Freeman?" the driver asked. "To the office," I said. "And then drive past the estate. I want to see it one last time before the demolition crew gets there on Monday." "Yes, ma'am." As the car pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Grant was still standing on the courthouse steps, a small gray figure against the massive stone pillars. He looked small. He looked insignificant. I turned my head and looked forward, toward the city skyline, toward the gleaming tower of North Star Quantum, toward the future I had built with my own hands. The revenge was complete. I had stripped them of their pride, their fortune, and their legacy. But the greatest victory wasn't the $10 million purchase or the public humiliation. The greatest victory was the silence in my own head, the voice that used to tell me I wasn't enough. The voice that sounded so much like Vivian Crowley was finally dead. There are those who are despised simply because they are silent, but when they speak, it is all over. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Cora Freeman and her journey from silence to power. It has been an emotional ride. and I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you in New York, London, Sydney, or somewhere else entirely? Let's get a conversation going in the comments section. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need a little bit of satisfying drama in their lives. Your support means the world to me. Stay tuned for the next story.